record.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Daryl McKell Brooks on the On Fire Show, and I am glad you're watching. I have two special guests there. I guess we're going to talk about economy from New Jersey, and he's in San Francisco, but there's some of the heavyweights of economics around the country, maybe around the world. And I have with me Mary Sabrin, Professor Mary Sabrin, professor from Ramapo College, and he has a book on why the Federal Reserve suck. You can get that. And he also is a candidate for United States Senate and governor of New Jersey. But also I have Robert Wenzel, economicpolicyjournal.com out of San Francisco. And so, hello, gentlemen. How you doing today? I am glad you're on the On Fire Show.
Thanks, Daryl. Great to be with you.
Daryl.
And great to be with Bob again.
Hey, Bob.
Very good to see you.
I'm definitely excited.
Let's get on fire for this one.
Yeah, I got you two guys on. You're both heavyweights. So tell me about coronavirus. What are we looking at compared to economics around the country, but also around the world? Are we prepared for a global recession? And what does that look like? Starting with you, Professor Mary Sabrin.
Well, this is not a recession in the ordinary sense of the term, because a recession takes place after the Federal Reserve has pumped so much money in. They create distortions in the economy. Prices tend to rise, and then they, quote, tighten credit. The money supply tends to either stabilize or shrink. And then you get all the bad investments that took place during the boom are revealed to be unsustainable. And then you get an economic correction, which is known as a recession. And of course, we had the big one in the 1930s called the Depression, which was extended by bad government policy. This is the first time, I think, in American history, Bob can correct me, that we've had an economic downturn because the federal government basically shut down the economy by telling us that the malls have to be closed, the car dealers have to be closed, small businesses have to be closed. In other words, this is a contraction of the economy because the government has ordered it so, not because there's been exposed all the malinvestments, which are going to happen eventually. But the point is, this is how government operates. The concept that government knows what to do best in a case like this pandemic. And I want to get Bob's thoughts on this because he's been writing a lot of good stuff on this on his
Bob.
Two websites.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Bob.
Murray, I
perspective.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Murray that what we've got here is something very, very unique. This is not like an ordinary recession. In ordinary recession, you've got the Federal Reserve pumping money, boosting the economy, then for whatever reason they stop and it crashes. This is completely different. This is a situation where the government has actually shut down the economy, large portions of the economy, and at the same time, to try and support the economy in kind of a bizarre way, the Federal Reserve is printing all kinds of money. I expect it to be record amounts of money that we haven't seen in decades, if ever, out of the Federal Reserve. And what that means is on the other side of the crisis, there's going to be all this money being pumped into the system, and it's going to be just sort of incredible what's going to happen as far as inflation is concerned. You know, most people aren't predicting that. A lot of people are predicting deflation, but I see it the opposite. You'll have trouble with prices. There'll be discounting in, for example, the cruise industry, maybe the airline industry, maybe the hotel industry. But the everyday things that we want to buy, and if we want to go out to a restaurant once they're open again, it's going to be so much buying pressure with all the new money the Federal Reserve is printing that I think it's going to be significant price inflation out there.
So what are you looking at for a year from now? Once this coronavirus up, once we're getting back into business, America opens up again, what are you predicting in the next year or so?
Well, here's the interesting thing,
Yeah.
Daryl.
Okay.
I found an indicator, I didn't create it, but someone else did, that points out that the price of oil is a leading indicator for the stock market 10 years in the future. And that indicator last year predicted that the price of oil, which peaked in 2011, was calling for a stock market peak in 2021. Well, who knew this virus was going to happen and that we get a sudden collapse in the stock market that was 35% from peak to trough recently. And I think what could happen, again, no one knows the future with 100% certainty. The only one I know who's come very close is Bob Wenzel, who's out there in San Francisco writing these great articles for his two websites. I think what we could have is could be a double dip. In other words, if Bob is right, which I think he is, that so much money will be created, has been created, that will be pumped into the system, that the stock market will get another big boost into 2021. And then as inflation accelerates, the Fed will say, hey, we got to stop this inflation. And they'll really cut back on the new money that they've created. And then we get that peak that would coincide with the April 2021 prediction of the oil price indicator that the stock market will peak. And we can get two peaks, a peak in February of 2020, and then a peak in early 2021. Again, nobody knows the future, but again, given the events that are unfolding these days, it's clear to me that the Federal Reserve is doing something, as Bob pointed out, unprecedented in human history. It's just going to create so much new money. And as Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, said, we are prepared to do our part to keep this economy afloat, which means that rather than allowing a natural economy to take place where prices adjust according to supply and demand, they want to keep all asset prices up, which includes the stock market, the bond market, the real estate market. And in order to do that, they've got to pump more money in. And so this is the problem we're facing in this country. We've had 100+ years of Federal Reserve policy. And it's been, as I point out in my book, which is right in the back of me here, everyone can see the Federal Reserve, why the Federal Reserve sucks. The Federal Reserve has given us bubble after bubble after bubble for 100+ years. And we just have to realize that the Federal Reserve does not create wealth. And that, I think, is the most important lesson that I've learned in more than 4 decades of studying the Federal Reserve and studying economic policy and teaching about this, that the Federal Reserve really should shrink its role in the economy, if not disappear.
So, Robert, tell us about the history. When the stock market, some of the problems of the stock market. You look at 2008, you look at 1987, and the crash of the market, the first one. So, how does this compare to now?
That's a really good question, Daryl, because in the past, as Murray has pointed out, there've always been Federal Reserve pumping money, then stopping, and that's caused the crash. That's what caused the crash in October 1987. That's what caused the Great Recession. And if you go back even to the Great Depression, that was it. There were changes in the money printing. This is entirely different in that it's the shutdown and the Fed is pumping money in. Now, in my EPJ Daily Alert, I told my customers the closest thing that the current situation is August of 1982, because Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker came in. He slammed on the brakes on money supply because he wanted to control a severe inflation we had in the late 1970s going a bit into the 1980s. And in August of and he created a severe recession at that time. But the Fed didn't put out press releases. They didn't announce their policy decisions. It was insiders getting the word. In August of 1982, it became clear that Volcker had changed his policy and that he was now going to pump money into the system, and the stock market took off. And it just went up. And in 39 days, it reached old highs, and it's been going up ever since with the minor dips here and there. And so I liken what's going to happen, at least in that first phase, after the lockdowns are over. The stock market is going to react very, very similar because it's triggered by an event versus Federal Reserve manipulation of the money supply. So in August 1982, although it was Fed manipulation of the money supply, the key was that Paul Volcker's change in perspective triggered everybody, and there was tons of money on the side because the stock market was getting killed all year into 1982, into the summer. And we've got the same thing now. The stock market is absolutely getting killed, and what you're going to have is a trigger that will, at sometime between now and say June 1st, people are going to say, hey, this is the end. I've got money on the sidelines. I better get in before other people do, because the stocks are going to go up from here. And I think you're going to see the same kind of move as that period.
So for those who are watching, the average working 9-to-5 worker, working class, middle class, struggling class, should they be worried in the next year or two about their job and their savings? You know, I tell a lot of people families should come together and bring their resources together. You know, because we know that, 6.6 million people unemployed. Should families be worried today?
Well, again,
Well,
I've
go ahead, Murray.
Go ahead, Murray.
No, I've been telling students this, that what we're seeing now is a revelation that despite what Trump has been saying about this economy, this is not the best economy in American history, because once you have a crisis like this where people are out of work, a lot of people don't have any savings to get them through the next few weeks or next couple of months, which is a sad reality. When I was an investment analyst up in Massachusetts in the in the early 1980s, one of the things we recommended to clients was to have at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a money market account or a savings account in case you do get laid off. Today, you probably need a year's worth of savings in order to tide you through. But we have this wide safety net that the federal government is now going to put a lot of money in the unemployment funds.
Is this hyper socialism?
Well, yeah, because here's the point I've been making for many, many years. The American people unwittingly have outsourced their lives to the federal government. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, housing, you name it. We are now so dependent on the federal government. We are at mercy of what they do for us or not, or what they don't do for us. And the thing is, they shouldn't be doing anything for us from a free market perspective. We are responsible for our lives. That is the free market, limited government view of the world. And unfortunately, through decades and decades of learning in the schools of propaganda by the politicians on both the Republican and Democratic side, people say, hey, I don't have to worry. The government's got my back. Look at all the corporations that are lining up for bailouts right now. So instead of having the notion that we are going to compete on our merits, we are going to rely on the federal government in case we have a problem. We saw this in the Great Recession, that the financial institutions got bailed out. So again, Bob has a good handle on this also. So Bob,
Mr. Wenzel, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with Marty. The only thing I would say is that in this situation with people, I mean, some people are going to need it to pay their rent. I mean, maybe if they can, they should talk to their landlords and discuss delaying paying a rent till they get a job again, even if they get this payment, because it's a very small part of money. But I would go out there and I would buy some the old type silver coins where the dimes and quarters were almost 100% silver, because those are going to go up in value. Silver is at $14 right now. We had it as high as 60 at one time when it ran up actually during the Paul Volcker period when it was trying to kill inflation. And we're going to get inflation back. So if people can sort of save that money, you buy the silver coins, maybe buy some gold coins. You buy a 1/10 gold coin. That'll be a bit expensive in the relative to the silver coins, but mix them up or at least buy the silver coins, and I think you're going to see some strong performance there. That's the way you're going to be able to hedge a bit against the inflation that's coming.
So one of the things that was talked about, all over the news, you see Macy's, JCPenney's, a lot of these businesses, store brand that we used to go to will probably go out of business. Is that good for America and in the economy that you have major businesses that probably are going to go under?
Well, in my lifetime, Daryl, which is a lot long now these days, we've seen so many companies go under, from the retail sector here in the New York City area, New York metropolitan area. The airlines, how many airlines have disappeared in the last 30, 40 years? Car manufacturers have gone under. Car models have gone under. Clothing stores have gone under. This is the part of the free market system that is natural. In other words, you have to meet consumer demand. If you don't meet consumer demand, remember, the consumers determine who succeeds in the marketplace. And this is something that's lost on the politicians. They think because a business is around, they're making so much money that we've got to tax them and we got to do all these regulations because they can get too profitable. This is the mindset of the socialist thinking that's out there. That, and in fact, we're seeing it today. Bob had a post on his website today, something I predicted a few weeks ago. Paul Krugman, the New York Times economist and Nobel Prize winner, he's calling for price controls. This is what happens when you have an emergency. The last time we had price controls was with Nixon in 1971, when he thought inflation was too high going into a presidential election year. He wanted to make sure the economy was going to be in good shape for 1972. And he basically undermined the economy with the money printing that the Federal Reserve did at the time. And so it was like the proverbial turning up the heat on a boiling pot by putting a brick on the pot so you avoid it boiling over. But this is what government does. Everything virtually everything it tends to do is counterproductive to allowing entrepreneurs to be very productive and successful, and allowing workers to be productive and successful.
So the one of the last questions I'm going to ask you both of you: what happens if if America stays closed for another month, 2 months? What happens if coronavirus keep going, and it's people are out of work for the next 2 or 3 months, and we're shut down? What happens to our economy? Because people are worried. They're hearing things on the news, whether it's the economy, how long you think this is going to last? When can I go back to work? Trump wants to open up America. He wants to open up America, open up the businesses. He's worried about the economy. What happens in the next 2 or 3 months or 4 months? I mean, we now have the NBA closed. We have baseball seasons gone, football, major concerts. How is that going to affect the economy in another 3 or 4 months?
Bob, go ahead.
Bob?
Yeah, no, Daryl, I think it's very, very serious, because see, what's happening on the other end is you've got a situation where basically the Fed is printing money to support everybody that's out of work. And that is extremely dangerous, because the more they print, the more severe the price inflation is going to be whenever this crisis ends. So they're talking about June 1st right now, which means there's going to be more bailouts for small businesses, more bailouts for individuals. Individuals may get another check. And there's a whole question of how you could structure this differently. But with the Fed printing the money, it's just going to make it put more money in everybody's pocket, with less manufacturing, less product around, less service around, less supply, more demand in terms of dollars. That just means you're going to have a inflation that is going to be stunning on the other end of this. That's the big problem. And God forbid it goes on for 3 or 4 more months. I mean, maybe this June 1st deadline will hold, but if it goes on any further, we're talking almost to Venezuela inflation then.
Wow.
Because they're just printing money.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the other thing that could happen, Daryl. That is, the government could take over the economy in terms of telling producers what to produce, how much to produce. In other words, have sort of like a Soviet central planning type of situation. And no one's even talking about it. And again, the more I think about this, because we discussed this in my financial history class, and this past week we talked about the Great Depression, and we're going to continue on Tuesday and relate it to what's happening today, because students are getting the knowledge that what we're seeing today is very reminiscent of what happened back in the 1930s with FDR, of trying to command the economy's resources to boost employment, production, and it was a total failure. This is the sad thing. In fact, there was a major article in the New York Times a week ago where the author wrote that Donald Trump is not FDR. Well, he's getting there, because he's now badgering 3M for not making enough masks. And he said they're going to be in big trouble if they don't follow our instructions. So this is the rhetoric of economic dictatorship, and it's very, very dangerous. In fact, we would argue, I think Bob and I would argue vociferously, that in a time of crisis, you need markets to function. You need government to stay away from the production and distribution of goods and services, because they're not smart enough to know what should be produced and how much should be produced and at what price. That's the other thing. I think that we're going to see price controls. I think Paul Krugman let the cat out of the bag when he says something. You know that the Democrats in Congress are listening, because they consider him sort of a demigod in the world of economics. And this is why I think we have to be vigilant. And with Bob's website, really pointing out Economic
Policy Journal
and targetliberty.com. These are two great
targetliberty.com
websites that I go to. I send post from those websites to my students so they can see what he and other people are writing about. There are also other websites that I send to my students, because we are in, I think, the final stages of this grand experiment known as big government.
Yeah.
The income tax, the Federal Reserve, Social Security. I mean, it's stunning what we're seeing in America today. I mean, I never thought I would see the day where the economy would contract at such a rapid rate because of a virus.
Yeah.
And this is something that Bob's been writing about. He has some really interesting insights about what's going on. So I know we just have I guess enough time to discuss what he thinks is going to happen with this shutdown, because Trump, he said it on his news conference today. He wants to open up the country because he said the cure may be worse than the disease, which is true, because
definitely.
the evidence is now piling up. People in isolation don't do so well. It's psychologically very debilitating.
Yes.
Alcohol sales are going up. Abuse is occurring. Spousal abuse, child abuse is going up. So, and the other thing, from a health point, people are not getting enough fresh air. That's another big thing that's happening in the country.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, you know, and both of y'all probably gonna understand this. I worry about America, especially with suicides happening. You know, individuals, they don't know what's happening. Like in the Great Depression, there were people that killed themselves, had suicide. And so you got a generation of people out there who are kind of in limbo. They're scared, they're afraid, they don't know what's about to happen. And they don't know, they don't worry about their finances. Kids aren't going to school, they have no job. So this could be another Great Depression here, especially in the mindset of individuals. Yeah. Bob, you want to say one more thing? Go ahead.
Daryl, I want to follow up on that. That's a very, very good point that, very few people are covering, but really the depression, the mental depression. There's a girl in Britain who was 19 years old, and she was diagnosed as a high-functioning autistic girl, and she killed herself just the other day because she was the type of person that needed feedback from other people all the time, and now she obeyed the authorities, stayed in this room, and couldn't deal with it and killed herself. And there was another guy they just reported on. Yeah, so I mean, it's terrible. So you can imagine that's resonating out there with a lot of people. I mean, it's not good, not healthy, and that's probably even worse than the shutdown, what's happening to some of these people.
Yeah, definitely. So is there anything both of you have to say before we leave?
Well, the thing is, as Bob pointed out, you've got to have cash on hand, 3 to 6 months of living expenses minimum. You've got to have some gold coins. You've got to have some silver coins. And again, I've been a subscriber to Bob's daily alerts, which is really very insightful financial and economic analysis, plus recommendations for investing. This is a service that is a daily service, which is really incredible, a lot of work to put into it. And he provides you with a lot of insight and recommendations on how to put together a portfolio in these very difficult times. And I just wish more people would subscribe to it.
We can get the word out now on Fire Show.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Mario. I'll have to send you a commission check. I really appreciate that.
Well, the thing is,
I really work. I work hard on that. You know, as Murray, as you see, I work hard on that. It goes up Monday through Friday when the markets are live, and I just posted at Economic Policy Journal some of the comments I'm getting from subscribers, because it's been a situation where, you know, I'm sort of giving people really guidance as to what to do here with investments because of what's going on with the economy and stock market and the volatility, and, you know, and how to deal with that. So, you know, thanks for the kind words there.
How much time do we have, Murray?
We have about another 10 minutes or so.
So one of the questions I would ask is about always the elephant in the room that people always they're questioning and they're thinking. War. Does war bring back an economy? Because people are afraid that we may go to war, maybe with China or some other country because of this.
This would be a total disaster. I mean, think about this. War is very expensive. I mean, just from a financial point of view, what nation wants to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on war? And the thing is, no nation benefits from war. I mean, the people don't benefit from the war. Obviously, the political elites benefit from war. The military-industrial complexes in various countries benefit from war. But the average person, the sons and fathers and brothers get killed. They come back maimed. They have PTSD. They have all sorts of illnesses, which the taxpayers have to pay for decades and decades and decades. War is let's put it what it is. It's mass murder. It's legalized mass murder. And again, I lived through the Vietnam War. I was not in the war. I was a college student, but nobody wanted to go to war in Vietnam. Why? Johnson ran on a peace platform in 1964. He said, American boys are not going to go to the jungles of Southeast Asia. FDR said 1940, American boys are not going to Europe to fight the war there. And in Wilson, in 1916 said, we're not going to go to World War to send American boys to Europe. And guess what? All three presidents got us into war a year later after they were successfully running as the peace candidate.
I understand that. Does war help the economy, though? That's what people are.
Yeah, Daryl.
Go ahead,
Daryl. I'll tell you. Here's a sort of counterintuitive way to think about it. After World War II, or when the war was ending and winding down, economists at the time were thinking, all these soldiers are going to come back, and where are they going to get jobs? How is this thing going to impact the economy? There's going to be unemployment all over the place. It's going to be a big, big problem. And there was no problem. First thing we had was the baby boomers. So you know what the first thing the soldiers had on their mind. But then they went to work immediately. And there was plenty of places there's never a problem with a shortage of work. You've got supply and demand that takes care of the wages. And it was a boom period for the economy, and it just continued on. You don't need an army, a military, or a war to keep an economy going. All you need is to keep it free so entrepreneurs can go out there and hire people. And right now we're in a situation where everything is clamped down. All you have to do is open that up, and you're going to see
So we definitely can come back.
No question. I liken it very much. I spent a winter in Chicago. And in Chicago, in the winter, it's kind of like a lockdown because it's so cold out there. You go out a little bit, but you don't really go out a lot. But then you've got spring, and the first week when it's really nice out, really warm, the restaurants are packed, the clubs are packed, the stores are, everybody is out because they just have to release that lockdown feeling. And this is going to be the same thing, I expect, unless they screw it up and tell us, you can sort of go out, maybe you can go to work, but don't go to a restaurant. Who knows what they'll come up with. But if they let it open, let it rip, it'll come back very, very quickly.
Well, I like to thank you all for coming on the show. Murray, I was on Fox 29 yesterday, day before yesterday, Fox 29 at 10 o'clock news. Newscaster, you remember me, and I was walking down Market Street getting some nice workout. He says, Mr. Brooks, would you like to be interviewed? And day before yesterday, Philly's supposed to play the Milwaukee Bruins, I believe, game opener. And I said, they asked me, what do you think about it? And I said that people, when people go back to the Philly games, people are going to appreciate it. People are going to go to the games. People are going to enjoy themselves, be happy again, like they're supposed to. But I think is enjoy each other's company. I think that's some of the most important thing, which just teaches us right now about how do we deal with each other when all this is over. Are we much nicer to each other? Are we more understanding, have more empathy for each other when dealing with this crisis, this global pandemic? And like I said, I'd like to thank you all for coming on the show. And you're definitely welcome to come on anytime. We can definitely have another great discussion, okay?
Thanks so much, Daryl. Bob, good seeing you again.
Bob, thank you. And it was a pleasure, Bob. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, same here. Thanks very much. Excellent questions.
All right, thank you. This is the On Fire Show with your host, Daryl McKell Brooks. I'd like to thank Murray Sabrin and Bob Wenzel out of San Francisco, and Murray is in here in New Jersey. And we hope that they stay safe and healthy, and we hope that you stay safe and be healthy. And this is important that everyone get over this coronavirus and get back to work. I hope that you've learned something from the On Fire Show and by these two guys that are economic geniuses in our country. Thank you for watching. This is Daryl McKell Brooks of the On Fire Show. And me, in my isolation, having a nice Diet Pepsi. Peace.